to your viewing audience. No one saying hello? You're going on camera right now. See? Everyone? Everyone? There you go, right? How'd that look? Perfect. Okay. So let's look at this very quickly. So AP exam, you have to write they call it a long essay or LEQ, whatever, the abbreviation, interesting, which is a regular essay. And I would do it in this relatively the same format, and I make sure it's organized the way I want it organized. We talked about thesis statements yesterday, talked about brainstorm lists. I told you a little bit about body paragraphs. This is something made up. Look on the front. Right on top, it has how they score, the 5 things you need. You need a thesis statement. You need context. You need evidence. You need evidence that relates to the topic. And then you need evidence that supports an argument. So you must be able to take evidence and use that as an argument to support your claim. Remember that claim is part of your thesis. And then lastly, okay, they have, I'm using the words they use: historical reasoning, addressing prompt, comparison, causation, cognitive change over time. Okay, they make this difficult. I'll make it simple. Did you answer the question? If you answer the question, you get a point. If you do not address what's in the question, you don't get it. If you just make a list of stuff back, you don't get a point. But one of the 5 points is the thesis statement. That's 20% of your point. And if you have a good thesis statement that's organized and makes a good claim, that's kind of number 5. And so that's really important. So let's get to this. I told you I'd do the introduction paragraph. Everybody, look at my nice little explanation of an introduction paragraph. Well, let me tell you one thing about it in an essay. In an essay, every paragraph needs a topic sentence. You have to have a topic sentence. Everybody know what a topic sentence is? That probably since you've been writing anything with a paragraph, right? I know I say when I do short IDs, I don't want a topic sentence. Well, for this, you need clear and concise, and basically for that little blueprint, the A, B, and C I told you about for your thesis, it's got to have that in there. Whatever the that'll be your topic sentence for the body paragraph. All right, next, you need 3 to 4 sentences, at least 2 good sentences. 3 to 4 sentences is context. In the opening paragraph, you're not summarizing your argument for the body. That's in the body. You're giving me background material about the era the question is in. That is context. So I don't want, if the question is about the factors that led to the American Revolution or the American Revolutionary War, I don't want a long thing about the American Revolution, but the titanic change in world history that brought about new events and changed the world forever. I don't want that. It's not good. That's another term we use. But I want facts and information that led up to it. So let's say you're going to talk about, the essay question is the events that led up to the Civil War. You take that first paragraph and talk a little bit about industrialization. You talk about the expansion westward. You talk about a few things of sectionalism, north and south, before the parts you get into bodybuilding. Sexualization, that is outside information that is not in your body paragraphs. Got that? It's background material that's not in your body paragraph. I'll repeat that one more time. That's background material that is not in your body paragraph. It's not generalities, it is things that led up to it. So if you're going to talk about, let's say, compromise of 1815 in the Kansas-Nebraska, then you, in your essay, you talk about the Mexican-American War, the Missouri Compromise. On the Industrial Revolution, if you're going to talk about the transportation revolution and innovation, that's when you can talk about the War of 1812, starting in Britain. Textile industry. Get what I'm getting at? Not only does that make a stronger essay, because now you're showing you know the material, you know the background, you know the events that led up to it. You're not just kind of guessing things that might fit in somehow, or just kind of stuff to fill space. You're showing you know the material. That's a strong essay. And it's a point on the AP exam. Everyone catch that? Context is a point. And you get a chance to show off where you know. You get a chance to show off. I know beyond what's going to be my body paragraph. I know I'm smart. Give me. Right? And then logically, that's context. So I will say context. If you're not sure again, make sure we look back on that, but think about things not in your body paragraph. Hey, don't you have a brainstorm list with kills with a bunch of stuff in there? Stuff in your brainstorm list that's not in your body. Give me a quick little 3-sentence explanation of those things. Body or your opening paragraph. Any questions on context? And we'll come back to it. So this is not, the opening is not a place for you to summarize your argument that you use in your body paragraph. You summarize your claim. Or I get a lot of, basically, somebody will rewrite the thesis. It's kind of 2 different ways to write the same. Context. And then your thesis statement. It doesn't have to be in this order, just you need a topic sentence, it can be thesis statement, then context, thesis statement, but you need that. All right. Thesis statement, don't forget X, my formula, X, the topic of the question or prompt, Y, your claim, the position of your essay, then your subtopics A, B, and C, for paragraph A and B. All right. Then let's look very quickly at my section on the body paragraphs. Body paragraphs, remember, those are basically glorified short ideas. So I have it listed right here. This is your subtopic. You need a topic sentence. You need an explanation sentence or 2. Or an explanation sentence, a little more context, draw out support your thesis. That's your explanation, explain what it is, and relate it back to your thesis, 1 or 2 sentences. And then, like short ideas, remember I always say you need 1 piece of evidence for an essay, or you need 2 pieces of evidence. Or 1 really good piece of evidence that you can write 3 sentences. Want to get the difference of that? That makes sense? Either 2 good ones or 1 really good one. And then that last sentence, that they call it complex understanding. What is that? Explain how it relates to your thesis. Explain how it answers your claim. 4-paragraph essay, you have 2 body paragraphs. All right, everyone look at the bottom. That's your closing, kind of restate, and then a little bit more big picture. So what it might do. That's all an essay is. What's the least important paragraph in a time? That's in a time that's closing. Because it's timed. You're running out of time. If you have time to finish it, that's great. That's the least important. People assessing, you should understand that in time. That's now obviously if you have time to go through and real rewrite, and you're close to be better. Time essay, the most important paragraphs are that the body and after the opening. On the last page, this is a long essay. That's the actual guidelines for the AP. How they give you that. 1 point for text, 1 point for thesis, 1 point for contextualization. Up to 2 points for evidence supporting an argument, and up to 2 points for basically answering the question. And you'll notice the last one, does everyone see the last part of understanding? You can get 4 pieces of evidence. What are 4 pieces of evidence? Think about it. Even if you're writing a 4-paragraph essay, you get 2 pieces of evidence per paragraph. That's 4. I mean, they got to do good pieces of evidence. They started that 3 years ago. I don't know if that makes for a good essay, but it helps us just for the AC exam. I think 2 pieces of evidence is very good for paragraph. Turn it over. All right, we have to make an outline. I made it kind of landscape on a landscape, so it will fit in. I've done a piece of paper, probably portraits, but you need a brainstorm list, body paragraph, and then we have a 5-paragraph essay, 1 more body paragraph. And that's basically everything you need. 1 or 2 words in each little section. So body paragraph, quick topic, couple evidence, maybe jot down the importance or effect just so you don't forget, just 1 or 2 words. In an outline, it's never going to be more than 1 or 2 words. Did everyone hear what I said? It's never going to be more than 1 or 2 words in an outline per section, except for you have to write your thesis out to make sure you got that sentence squared away. So whatever your body paragraph is here, for that first one, let's say it's transportation. 2 examples. Reason why it's only 1 or 2 words is you're doing this before you write the essay. You don't want to write too much down because that's time. Clock is ticking. And then a brainstorm list. So what are you going to do when you do your test? I will give you this, and I will give you the questions in advance. You can have it all written out on this. Your brainstem outline and thesis. You can practice it. Have the test. Then when we actually do the test, you're going to have to rerun it. So I want you to go through the time log. You know how you have to do an outline, do a brainstorm, and then write the essay. But you can have it all ready to go. The copy. That's the test part. You have to remember. But once you write it once, it's not hard. Right? And I'll do 2 things. I'll give you credit for it, but I'll brainstorm and outline. And if everyone has this filled out and showing they studied, then I'll just show them before the test. I'll put it away. I'll do the test. I'll give you a couple months credit. Sound good? But it's me. I really want a good essay. Just thinking. You do that writing, not that studying. You study. You write out your outline. Put it away, quick write it, write the essay. And because of that, because of a few other reasons, I decided there's no way. I tried to pack it in on Thursday, hoping I might be able to get first quarter. I'm not. So I'm changing it. What I was worried about, a grill was not going to happen, but then I just decided, well, we're not going to do it. On Thursday, we're going to do it. We can't do it on Fridays. A bunch of people don't. We can't do it on Monday because of the shortened period. So what day are we going to do? Is everyone happy with Tuesday? Do you really want to do it tomorrow? You do? Tuesday okay for everybody? All right, good. Let's go and put this away. Anybody have a question? So I'll give you the question on Friday. There'll be 2 questions. You choose one. So I'll give you a chance on Monday if it's a quick question about it, I'll answer it. Quick brainstorm, outline, brainstorm thesis, boom, write it. This one in class will be a 4 paragraph. 4 paragraph. Everyone finishes, everyone has time to get through all the parts. Did we get the children's? It's struggle we quit, isn't it? We got the Christmas. It's almost Christmas. And I told you about the first police force. What city would have the first permanent full-time police force? To stop what? The Christmas riots. And it's pretty amazing in just a few years, it would turn into something totally different. And what is it called? Well, it's change in belief because of the Industrial Revolution that the women's role is in the home. And they are too noble and pure to go out in the real world. Yeah. Yeah, both the domesticity. And this is still around here to this day. And this would become traditional, the traditional role of women. They would have to be kind of forced into this, and women are going to be really Crispy's program, really resistant to this. Only one avenue for success in your entire life. That's it. While men have many, and as years go by, many more. So they started bringing back a few other holiday traditions. That's where Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, he just kind of made up a whole Christmas. But was the night before Christmas and all through the house? Made up. Just kind of made up a whole poem. It doesn't mean it's not a good poem, but it wasn't really any traditional thing. Just kind of made up. And so, and I talked about, didn't I talk about how would it be nice to your kids because now having children was such a choice? And then demand for the Industrial Revolution. Did I mention that in class? Yeah. Sell goods. They go hand in hand. And that's where all of a sudden that guy came from. So Saint Nick and Santa Claus, a couple of different. There's a German that's kind of a British version. The Dutch have a big one, even though the Dutch Saint Nick is tall, skinny, and kind of evil. Which, don't get me wrong, of course, Santa Claus is kind of evil. Most people. Pretty totalitarian, from my point of view. But Thomas Nast, one of the most famous cartoonists in American history, right before the Civil War, drew this cartoon right here. And he made the Santa Claus. Eventually become red, sometimes came with blue and green. By the end of the century, red. Here's another Thomas Nast by the end of the century. Just made up that whole character, and soon it's a worldwide phenomenon. It's sort of amazing how quickly that happened. I love this one from Harper's Magazine at the end of the Civil War. And there's Santa Claus, wasn't established yet, but it's that's very new, giving gifts to the soldiers. It's amazing how quickly it happened. And to where people believe that was always the traditional way. And don't forget, Christmas was not an important Christian holiday. Easter is the holiday for Christians. But then all of a sudden you have people going by the end of the century saying we've forgotten the true meaning of Christmas. We should go back to the traditional Christmas. And people say that to this day, which is fascinating to me. It's like, do you really want to go back to the traditional Christmas? Do you really want to riot? I mean, maybe you do. I don't know. Let's do it. Let's burn it down. No. I'm filming this, by the way. And so that's when you get people just, they don't understand the roots of the Christmas, especially it's very secular outside the realms of religion. That's why you see it in so many places that aren't Christian. And it's celebrated by people who are Christian. Even though I will say my niece and nephew who are Jewish, they look at it with just kind of a quiet amusement. The whole thing just kind of makes them kind of laugh. Interesting way I find that. Yeah, okay. Yeah. But I said this last period because I brought this up. Ever seen that? And so in one of the fights for traditional Christmas, it was really big about 20 years ago, but it still cops around today that we got to get rid of that because that's anti-Christmas. And what? And it just goes to show you that people can say stuff and they have a lot of conviction behind it and have no idea what they're talking about. Anybody know what that means? Christianity is a very Greek religion. It's Greek. So the whole thing is Greek. It's just all the elements are Greek. And that's anybody know how you pronounce that verb in Greek? Chris. And this was a symbol for the original Christian cross, which looked like that, and it's called the shori, or Christ, which is Christ, and that's what it means, Christmas. So that's one. So if anybody says that, it's crossing out Christmas. No. Okay, moving on. Somebody look. It was crazy. I mean, it got out of control. All right, so that we'll come back a little bit to Christmas down the road, but ironically, out of these big changes in the family, especially for women, but also for children, would come about the women's rights movement, which would begin in Britain, but come to the United States. Now, this is middle-class women, because they're the first ones who are being hit with the cult of domesticity. Families that could afford some of these trappings of upper-class life, they were more likely to have the women take this domestic role, the new domestic role. And so, if women are responsible for the morality of their family, of their children, why not society? And women who shaped against this idea that their only role is inside the household said, but what's the difference? If we are so moral and pure, why can't we help everybody? And so remember that sphere of the women, the traditional sphere, because the women's sphere is not just the home, but wherever she makes it. So that was from the 1850s. The idea being they could step into these various reform movements that started at this time. Abolitionists, I don't know why I capitalized prison, 10 difference. Abolitionist means freedom for whom? Say it again. Yeah, slavery and slavery. And temperance means to cut down on what? Yeah, drinking, which all kind of makes sense. And also prison reform, like the beginning of having set sentences, not just arbitrary sentences, and maybe actually reforming in prison. They would actually have a thing called a penitentiary, which you've all heard of, where you would get this to become healed. If you've ever been to one of the original penitentiaries, ooh, they're scary. Of course, I don't know if you know this, prison's pretty scary. But all these reform movements, but you can imagine what happens. Wait a minute, we're fighting for freedom for others, basically men. What about our rights? And that's how it began. Lost rights, cult of domesticity. We'll fight for freedom for others, and what about us? We'll see a similar thing in the 1960s. Women who got involved with the civil rights movement realized, I think very correctly, to my personal point of view, this is my bias. Wait a minute, we're fighting for the equal rights for men? What about half the population? So, equal legal, political, economic rights. But the most important right they believed, because all these legal, economic, and political, that all stems from voting. This political process of voting in Britain was the first women's rights movement for voting. They called them the suffragettes. That was a very common thing added. Added to the end to say it's for women. And we'll come back to this. I'll tell you about how a little bit about this when we get to Title IX and beginnings in 72, 73 to have women's sports in like high school and college. But suffragettes, the right to vote. And this is from the 1890s, but it's a pretty good, pretty famous picture. And so middle-class women would lead this. And at first it was, even though the leaders are going to be white, it was going to be equal rights for all, but that would kind of go away to just equal rights for white women. We'll come back to that part. But the three most important leaders in this era, actually the two most important leaders, and then their successor, the one who carried the torch, so to speak. Lucretia Mott, brilliant woman, able organizer. She would organize the first women's rights convention. And then her close friend, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, both are happily married, especially Stanton, not especially, but Stanton's husband was very supportive of her. But Stanton was also brilliant, but just charismatic. And if you're going to lead a political organization, charisma really helps. And you can have someone who's really smart and really capable, but if they can't appeal to people and talk to people. And then Susan B. Anthony was very young at the beginning of this movement, but she was a tireless worker for equal rights and cutthroat, hard-nosed, uncompromising. The 19th Amendment is called the Susan B. Anthony Amendment. So these three she wanted to be like Stanton, but she was much more like Mott, which two very noble people to follow. So the first ever women's rights convention will be in Seneca Falls, and I'll show you a little bit later why it's going to be there. And 1848. It began their declaration from this with the statement, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. Hold these truths to be self-evident. What document is that taken from? You remember? Yes, the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence. I get it if you say the Constitution, but they're not the same thing. The Constitution has nothing about it, except for a little kind of hint in the preamble. And their number one goal was suffrage. And they came out of kind of this euphoria, but it's going to be a a difficult and painful and sometimes very violent fight that it would not be for 72 years till the Susan B. Anthony Amendment would be ratified. Now, voting is a state process. And so some states did allow women to vote earlier, and we'll come back to this. Introducing it, we'll come back. And that's the way it is. We have to kind of hit the things. Montana would allow women to vote in 1914, so 6 years before the 19th. And a few other states were before Montana. Here are the number of women. You can see right here, 1 and 2, Mott, Stanton. I'm sorry, Mott, Stanton, no, 2, 4, 2, I'm sorry, 1 and 4. And then here's a number of men who went, and many of them were involved in different movements. And one of the most fitting and tireless fight for equality, one of the most famous men in American history. Hope some of you have heard of him, Frederick Douglass, right here. And they believe it went hand in hand. Seneca Falls was a big deal. So Britain, the movement started, Industrial Revolution, but the United States had the first one. Ironically, 1848, or maybe not ironically, 1848 was the year of revolution all over Europe. Those of you who know a little bit of European history know that was just violent revolution all over. The United States, for various reasons, escaped that, but clearly there were revolutionary things going on, like the expansion westward, etc. Yeah. It was up until 1920, so that amendment. Now, age, that was up to the states, up until 1970. And even then, even with that, it doesn't say that women have the right to vote. It just says the right to vote to women can't be taken away. So you don't have a right to vote. It's a very weird thing. You don't have when you turn 18, you don't have a right to vote. I don't have a right to vote. I just kind of have it taken away from because of color of skin, folks. Okay, and there will be a huge backlash. A backlash against this, saying that women are going against traditional values. If women demand the right to vote, that's when you know families will break up. Women will abandon their family and abandon their children. It's really shows out a very low opinion of women. Clearly, if they're so noble and pure, all it would take is the right to vote for them to abandon their family. They'll show a lot of way or how misogynistic this was. But this is from Britain, and it's hard to see. But it's supposed to be a cartoon. What happens if you allow women to vote? Women will take over parliament, and there'll be, women will just fight, and they'll be gossiping and sewing and not paying attention, and everything will fall apart. Because you know how women. It's very sexist, obviously. But it's implying that nothing will ever get done with women in charge. Oh, of course, and then men would come in hand to try to beg women to do things. And of course, there would be a nagging women behind them ordering what to do, which is kind of amusing. In a dark way. Yeah, this is really misogynistic. I will tell you about the backlash against the women's rights movement in the 70s. It's kind of shocking. Kind of shocking. It involves bathrooms. Moving on. Religious upheaval. Religious upheaval. This is another big reaction. A massive change in religious feeling happens every single time. Every single time. There is massive change. We'll see this rise in religious conversions, more people getting involved in religion, changes that the mainstream church will call halts, happened in the 1800s, happened in the 1920s, happened in the 1990s, could be happening now. So first off, the so-called liberal churches, meaning those that stood for liberty more and more open churches, who become more established. Ironically, these churches came out of the most restricted churches, the Puritans. Now, empiricism is a word from that era. They accepted empiricism. Think about empiricism as the technological changes. They accepted the new technologies. They accepted capitalism. All right, we accept it. But that's fine. That means you have to adapt to the new situation, but still live a noble but still live, as their point of view, a Christian life because we have a loving God. And there's universal salvation. Do you remember predestination? Where it said that the Creator has decided, or God has decided creation, whether or not you go to heaven or hell. Well, they say, why would God go through all the trouble of creating somebody if they're going to send a good hunk of the people to eternal damnation? That makes no sense. We're all going to be saved. So we should act like good people on this earth because it's the right thing to do. And so the two most important churches out of that are going to be the Unitarians, which are also called the Congregationalists. The big Congregational church. It's the one here. Right by the church, by the hospital here, and Universalists, Universal Salvation. And they kind of have a tie-in with deism. Never got that? That is the liberal churches. So that's one reaction. So we have one reaction. The world is changing. Let's adapt. Let's adapt to it as we go. We'll help you out by you have a loving God. But that was not the one that swept by wildfire. It was the Great Awakening, a religious upheaval, a religious change, and typhoon would come in. It's a hurricane since we have now. At least it's category 2 now in Cuba. Nearly 100-mile-per-hour winds. Did you see in the High Line by this afternoon where it might get anywhere from 60 to 90-mile-per-hour winds here in Montana? We might get 30 to 40 this afternoon. That could bring some trees up. So think about this massive disruption in society. The new wage system, all the technological change. You can see it coming. Even if it hasn't happened to you, it's scary. Everything you thought you knew about life was being blown up. What does that mean? People look for security, look for salvation, look for solace in this changing world. A very similar thing is going to happen in the 1890s and even bigger in the 1920s. Just the wave of this kind of traditional religious changes here. It's a little bit different, but similar. We'll see it again in the 1990s and relatively recently, kind of these, they're going to be called televangelists. In the 1920s, it was radio. Here it's tent revivals. And there was a wave of nostalgia to look back. And people started to say, let's go back to the good old days. To the way when life was so much easier before all of this change. But the important thing about this is, first off, this will become an element of a conservative cultural view. To go back to the way things were. Where did conservatism, the term, comes from? To conserve the old hierarchies, like having a king and not the radicalism of the American or French Revolution. Well, let's go back to the old days. But do you notice I did not put to the way things were, to the way things should have been? What do people do when they look back on the past, lovingly, nostalgically? Huh? Well, they do reminisce, but do they remember the bad things? Only the good things. So let's not go back to the reality. Let's just go back to the good things we remember. And so that is an element. So we'll see this time after time. In the 1920s, they would say a return to normalcy. Let's go back before all these radical changes like the car and the telephone and radio and women having the right to vote. Go back where women knew their place. See, in the 70s, in fact, it would be such a big wave in the 70s that the famous presidential campaign, their slogan will be, let's go back to when life was better for all these equal rights. Ronald Reagan's slogan was, let's make America great. And that would copy the exact conservative trend that would bring President Trump in. Let's go back to when things were better. He just copied it. He just copied Ronald Reagan's slogan. So that is conservative. And I would argue we all have elements of this. Nothing is just cut and dry. You're one way or the other. I look back at things, and if I want to look back and reminisce, kind of, oh, that was great. I kind of block out the bad things. Okay, sometimes I do the opposite. I only remember the bad things, but Baptists and Methodists were two new sects of the Protestant faith, Protestant Christianity, that would soon evolve into huge mainstream religions. They started for the Anabaptists. The Methodists was literally a different method of salvation. And they started in Britain and swept like wildfire across the United States. Both would divide, and the Baptists are still divided by what happened in the 1850s. They split North and South because of slavery, and there's still a big divide today in Baptists. So, the Great Awakening. So, 1820s, I'm sorry, 1920s it was radio, 70s, 80s, 90s, up through today it's television, mega churches, etc. Then evangelical revivals, these tent revivals, where these traveling itinerant ministers would give these, in fact, they used to be called charismatics. We mentioned that once before. These fire and brimstone, heaven and hell. Heaven and hell. You either be saved or eternal damnation sermons. And the reason these worked is because people wanted security. And the idea being the world is scary and I don't know what's coming, but I can find security if I just believe what they're saying. What does that mean? Salvation. This world's scary. I believe salvation. And I'm not minimizing anyone's personal belief system or faith, but I'm telling you about why this spread so much in times of traumatic times like this. And it's very emotional. It's not like think about mainstream Protestant faiths like Lutheran or Episcopal with a very strict dogma, or even more strict dogma for Christianity. Those who are Catholic know what I'm talking about. Very strict. Well, this is very emotional. The sermons would be emotional and just related to the Bible. And this is where you start getting people calling this salvation born again. And eventually, in the next century, they'll call it the rapture. Has anyone heard of the rapture? Yes. Well, they called it millennialism. Millennialism. And that means judgment day is coming. The end is near. And eventually, those who believe will be called up to heaven. And those who remain, they will be in a world of fiery hell called Armageddon. That's what the rapture is called up. The end is near. There's premillennialism, there's postmillennialism. We're not going to go into details about that. Some people believe they're millennials, the end is coming, but it's metaphorical. Some, it's the real thing. 100% we're going up. And once again, everyone's personal belief, that's up to you. I'm telling you the differences. So if the end is coming, if you believe tomorrow's the end, it changes what you do today, doesn't it? Completely. So, accept the material world, because it doesn't matter. The answers are in spiritual. For your post, spiritual. You'll get an outline. So don't complain about the material world. Don't complain about the wage system. Don't complain about bad working conditions or monopolies, because it doesn't matter, right? What's going to happen? Heaven or hell, it's coming. All right. Whatever personal benefit that people get from their belief system, and clearly it can be very profound. But who else benefits from people not complaining about the wage system? Who else complains about people not complaining about working conditions? How do these traveling tent revivals get money? Who benefits? Capitalists, underworlders, big money, underworlders. Why? Don't start it. Doesn't make it bad. But it's important to understand. Could this happen today? Of course it can. It's amazing how things ripple. They'll get involved very politically. Soon, we get two new political parties out of the Industrial Revolution called the Democrats, the Democratic Party, and the Whigs. And the Whigs will be saying the Democrats are godless heathens and non-Christians. Why? Because they have a lot of Catholic immigrants in them. and they believed in democracy. So the burnt over district of New York was area of a lot of religious revival. You're going to get all kinds of different sects and religions form up and flourish. Two that really got their start, for example, with the Bill of Rights, I'll talk about in a second, which would go away. But one religion didn't. Mormons would flourish in upstate New York and would become mainstream. But if you look right in the middle, Seneca Falls. It's no coincidence, Seneca Falls. Abolitionist churches would be there fighting against slavery. And that's where Frederick Douglass could live in peace, especially since he was a person who ran away from being enslaved, fought his own freedom, and would fight tirelessly for equal rights for all. Or for that matter, a guy named John Brown, who we'll get to, who's also my yearbook photo for years until they got married. So, attention, everybody. Uh-oh, attention. Are you at attention? This can only be one thing, right? Let's write a thesis. Cheer. Let's write a thesis. No, you guys don't want to make big emotional. Here's an essay question. I want you to write a thesis for this. Take a second, go back and look at your notes on the transportation revolution, and write a thesis. Remember, X, that is the main theme of the question. Y is your claim. The A, B, and C, those are your subtopics. Go. Okay, that's not knocking. Let's come in. This time I won't be nuts. If you need to go back and look at your notes really quick, that's fine. But go back and think about it. Oh, let's write a 4-paragraph essay. Just an A and a B, okay? Just an A and a B. Sound good? Go. Take about 3 minutes at the most. Practice. I do that. I'm checking my weather. So might get a little rain and then the wind's coming. Think about what your Y is going to be. Think about your A and B, then write the paragraph. Sentence, not paragraph. Sentence. Okay, when you're done, look back, make sure you have a clear X. Okay, if you can't think of a good claim, remember you use a good claim, a good why. You can use political, economic, social, but the economic changes. It's not quite as strong, but it's still better than no one. The industrial revolution expanded. Find something that all expanded what? Think about what happened to costs. Think about what the railroads did. That one. What do you want? Very good. All right. So now one. That's one. And it's just the first one. So once you said really quick. Look at your why. Okay, who want to tell me what their why is? Their plan. What's their plan? Then what was yours again? Yeah, efficiency is a great one. That's a very good one. What was yours again?
Yeah, transportation revolution, back to the industrial revolution, trade.
Increased trade. That's a very good one. You want to have another one? You have another one. Trade, expansion. You can also put down like lowering cost. You could put down a wave of innovation. All of those could work. Let me give you mine really quick. Why is this here? I did not do it here. That's mine. That's a 5-paragraph essay. Okay, real fast. Well, we're not much time. Railroad, new canal, dropping shipping charges. One thing. If I was doing a 4-paragraph, I would put down shipping charges and probably railroads. Probably railroads. We'll do more. Trying to give you much time, but worked out pretty good. So when's the essay test? And I'll give you the essay questions on Friday. You have 2 questions, you must answer 3 of them. Sound good? 2 questions, answer 1. It'll be so much fun. I don't you have to write your own. You too. See you.
I don't know if you this, but I just still have to. Oh, okay.
Oh, I haven't.
Okay.
What was the last job in my?
Yes. Am I able to retake, like, not retake, take the quiz on Monday? I was working again.
You gotta do it. You have to do it, we have to do it right before, right at the end.
Oh,
No, 2 more days.
Okay.
Yeah, we gotta get it done tomorrow. We just.
yeah, I forgot like the order. Thank you.
Yes.
Out to get you.
When should I make a cookie that I?
Well, we can't do it at the beginning of this, but we have to do it right away, as soon as possible. So you got a couple choices.
Can I do how long?
Well, I guess I'm.
It'll
Yeah,
take like 2
yeah, I'll let you, just remind. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I feel like nobody left here. I love her to death. You were in your class this way. I like my class. way too long yesterday. They need a couple more hours to snow because they got 5 last night.
Oh,
Because I backed it off, they put it in water in the morning after the movie of the tea. Oh my God. It's pretty painful to see it. Oh. I just put it silver. I think not. Here, turn my tooth. So close there. I'm gonna like the.
Cool.
yeah, I think.
You guys don't get ready.
No. Right, just you, yeah, it's pretty like, yeah, yeah. We started this.
Huh?
Yeah.
I'll sat there and cry.
It's still, I'm so cold out.
And then we're like, Justin, are they like the one?
Oh, no, it's fine.
And he's like, no, I don't mean to say anything. We're like, he's like, no, it's those ones. Whole thing. We're like, what do you mean the one that he's on his phone right now? He's like, no, they like just been.
In the highway, it would be 100-mile.
And then at one point, it really crosses his face. And he's like, I don't know what you guys are laughing about.
Well, actually.
I was like, maybe he's over his hands. And he's like, no, there's nothing. No. And like, I don't know, it's like, dude, are you guys? Like, the key's in my hand. And then he looks back and I wait for me on stage. Dude, it was hilarious. He kept saying, "Are you so exactly?"
I have gifts.
Yeah.
Look at me a better one. You like Led Zeppelin or just have a shirt? They kind of pretty sure. Why? I've never seen. I wish I could. They quit. Yeah.
Maybe I'm sure it was like a thing my dad was doing.
It's nice. Easy. See that.
Paper.